Hello, do you enjoy interactive author discussions? Well, welcome to Story Behind the Story with Reese Ryan, where romance readers and authors connect. I'm Reese Ryan, author of sexy, emotional, grown folks romantic fiction featuring characters age 30 plus who are finding love while navigating career crisis and family drama. And today, my guest is going to be author Megan Frampton, who writes those deliciously sexy, scandalous historical romances. So we're going to be chatting about historical romance, what it is that she loves about writing it and reading it, what I enjoy about reading it. And we're going to recommend some historical romances, especially for people who have not read a lot of historical. I'm going to be asking her about her research methods for her historicals, as well as how she got started writing them. So if you're looking forward to all of that, be sure to stay tuned. We're going to get into all of that in just a moment. First, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. If you're new here, I would love it if you subscribe to our channel so that you'll know about future chats that I'm having with author friends. Like next week's panel that I'm going to be having with several authors, Lee Karen, Kayla Gross, and Taj McCoy. We're going to be talking about the importance of body diversity and body positivity in romance. So I'm super excited for us to have that chat. So make sure that you subscribe so that you'll know about future shows that are going on. Also, if you are joining us from Facebook, welcome. But if you want to join the conversation and you want us to be able to see your profile and your name, you'll need to scroll to the bottom of the description there on Facebook, and you will be able to give StreamYard permission to see your profile and your picture, so we'll know who we're engaging in conversation with. And then if you're excited about today's show, don't forget to hit the like as well. So you want to like, subscribe, and then share the show so that other readers can find it as well. And then last quick reminder is that my latest release, Return to Hummingbird Way, is now available everywhere. So if you haven't read Sin and Rhett's story, I invite you to, because I've been waiting for so long for readers to read the story and to meet these characters, and Rhett's matchmaking grandma, Mama May, who is a hoot. I love her, readers love her, and I can't wait for you to meet Mama May. So with all of that, it's time to get into our show today. So Megan, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. It's so good to have you. How are you feeling today?
I feel pretty good. I'm not at my home. I'm away, kind of working remotely, very remotely. And it's been nice because I got to walk around the city. I'm in Seattle right now. And I went to a bookstore and took pictures of their big romance section, which was exciting. And it's like yeah, I know. I was really impressed. I was amazed. And I got the best scone, and I went to a cat cafe. So pretty much I'm living my best life. So there you go.
Okay, you'll definitely have to tell us about the cat cafe. Okay.
Yeah.
So for readers who might not be familiar with you, Megan, tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you write.
So I'm Megan. I usually live in Brooklyn, New York with my family, and I write very frothy, kind of rom-com-ish, I guess. I'd say witty, I guess, historical romance.
I would definitely say
yeah.
witty.
Thank you. It's very light. It's very accessible, and I like to think that I write about characters that seem real, that you can meet them even if they're wearing a ball gown and sipping tea. They seem like people you might be able to meet even, out of time and stuff. And I think I've written about 20 books for Avon. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Are all of your books with Avon?
I actually had, let's see, my first book came out 2005. With Signet, which they had a traditional Regency line way back in the day. And so I was one of the last books they published. And then they closed the line, and I was like, oh, well, that was nice. And then I got published by Love Swept.
That happens in publishing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had 2 books with Love Swept, which was Penguin Random House's digital imprint. And then I went over to Avon. So I've been with Avon for a very long time, and they're a really good home for me. I think I write a very classic, what people think of as classic Avon romance.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got started writing.
So writing is my second career. My first career, I was in the music industry, and I worked for a college trade magazine that covered alternative music. And we also had an annual convention that was held in downtown New York. And I eventually ended up working on the programming for them. And then we had an event scheduled the week of September 11th, 2001. And we could not clearly do the event. Everything got postponed. We had to rebook the entire thing. And as a result of which the company lost a ton of money and I got laid off. At the time I had my kid was 2.5, I think. So my husband and I decided that I'd just stay home. Like, it made sense, right? It seemed like a good time. But I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go insane if I don't do something other than sit with this child. And when I had been breastfeeding, the only books I could read or hold were mass markets, because I only had one hand, right? So I used to read a lot of lit fic and a lot of, that kind of stuff, but I wasn't in the mood. I read romance, I read mysteries, pretty much it. And so I thought to myself, you know what, you're home now, why don't you try writing a romance? Because I loved reading romances, and I gave that up when I went to college. I majored in English, but then I went back to looking at it and finding out as much as I could about it. And I approached it kind of, which I realize only now, I approached it the same way I approached learning about music and learning about groups, and just kind of trying to find all the connections and finding all the people in the world and building up like a repertoire of authors I liked, tricks I liked, things like that. And I started writing, and the first book I wrote, I think I rewrote it 3 times. First book I wrote, is the one that came out with Signet. And then I wasn't published for 7 years. So but I was stubborn and I stayed in it and I kept writing.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I know and I know your readers are glad you did.
Yeah, thank you. It's because of 9/11 that I started writing.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Weird.
The different stories of how people become writers, or what made them finally get into it. Because a lot of us, quite a few of us wrote when we were younger, very young people. So I used to write all the time, and you just never, maybe as you get older, you didn't think it could be a career, or you tried to do something else. And so it's interesting to hear all of the different ways that people come into it. So that's how you got started writing fiction. What drew you to writing historical fiction specifically?
So when I was about, I want to say I was like maybe 11 years old, I started, my parents were both big readers, and we had an enormous house. We had one room, and my mom was incredibly slobby. And we had one room that had books everywhere on the floor, piled in huge stacks. And I started reading Agatha Christie's Georgette Hayes. And I think she must have had some other stuff in there. But then I started buying my own Barbara Cartlands, because they were at the local store. And I remember my first Barbara Cartland was a book called The Penniless Peer. And I just devoured those. And so that was my basis for stuff. And I've always liked history, and I like knowing how people live, no matter when they lived. So given that I had read so much historical stuff, it just seemed like that's what I wanted to write. I never really read that much contemporary romance. I don't think I knew it existed. I lived in a tiny town in New Hampshire, and then we moved to Massachusetts, and I think by then I was onto something else. But I I just thought, I just have always loved historical stuff. Jane Eyre and Jane Austen are my two, pillars that form everything I write, I think. And it just seemed like a natural thing for me to do. So.
What you said about love, being interested in how people live, that's one of the things I find so fascinating about, like, I love museums and stuff. And so one of the things that, because Cleveland Museum of Art, I'm from Cleveland, is one of my favorite places in the world. And one of the things I really was always just super fascinated by was there's this room they have there. And I haven't been in a while, so I'm assuming it's still there. But there's a room they had, you could actually look through the window in the room, and it's like from this little French home from, I don't know, 1700s or something. And everything is just as it was then. They have it, and they have it there. And just every time I go and look at things like that, I'm always really fascinated by it and wondering about how people lived and all of that. So that's kind of one of the things you get to do with historical. So that's really fascinating. I love that. And just to say hello, thank you so much for joining us, Dolores Lee. And Miss Loretta, thank you for joining us as well, who is a librarian.
Oh, neat.
And Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us as well. And Cheryl says, I have also been fascinated with how people lived in other time periods. Yeah, I really, really am fascinated by that. And that's why I love going to the museum and seeing all those, at the Cleveland Museum of Art, we just have some really intricate pieces of furniture and just, dishware and stuff from back then. And I'm always just really, really fascinated about that and the stories behind it. So speaking of that fascination and the stories behind all of it, like with any book, there's research. I'm a little weird about my research because I need to feel, I'm very visual, and I need to feel like, for instance, I'm in the room. If I'm staying a couple's in a hotel room, I'm going to look up an actual hotel room so I can kind of have a visual of what that looks like. But with something like historical romances, there's even more. There's all this research you have to do to make sure that it's accurate to the time period that you're writing. So what are some of your best tips for research when it comes to writing historical romance?
I feel like because my books are kind of, they used to be, I don't think people call these anymore, but they used to be called wallpaper historicals, where it's just kind of a vague feeling of the history around you. And that is what I write. So a lot of times what I pay a lot of attention to is etymology, to make sure that I can use the words I'm using in conversation. And I'll do research on what people might have known at that time or might have thought about things, like really their approach to thinking and reason and stuff is more interesting to me than what kind of carpet they had on the floor. So again, that goes with how they lived, right? Like I'm not usually going to describe a chair or anything like that in depth. I do love the fashion. I got to admit that. That's one of the big reasons. I mean, no, spoiler, I'm going to say that later on why I love writing historical romance. But for me, I usually end up finding like little nuggets of interesting history. One of the things, actually several books ago, there was a guy the hero of one of my books was fascinated with trains, because I write in mid-Victorian when trains are happening. And there's a part of the train called an eccentric crank. And when I found that, I like hooted in joy, because then I could have the heroine call him that. And they were, all this stuff going on. And so that's kind of the research I do, is kind of on the spot. I don't do a ton of research, because I'm just telling a love story. I'm setting up the parameters, and I know the world really well. Like, they shouldn't be alone together, but of course they're going to be alone together. And so I have to manipulate how that happens, but it's much more about the societal norms for me than the actual practical research. So.
That's good to know. And that I think about that all the time. And because I am actually working on, and we will be shopping a historical romance that I'm writing. And so that's one of the things that definitely I
Mhm.
have to like everything that I'm thinking, wait, did they know that at this time?
Right,
You know,
right.
did
Yeah.
they was this wordage
Mhm,
were these words in use at that time?
mhm,
And like I have a tower of books, you know, both fiction and nonfiction for that time
mhm.
period. And I'm just like, oh,
What time period are you writing in? I need to know.
spoiler alert,
Oh,
it is the
can you
Harlem
say?
Renaissance. Yeah, yeah, it's the Harlem
Oh.
Renaissance. That's the period that I want to write
Oh,
in.
I've read
So
some books set in there. That was such an amazing time. And
yes.
what tell me the time period of that. Like what are the
So,
dates?
and that's the other thing I'm trying to, because that's another thing.
Oh.
Like that's one of the
Mm,
things in reading is that you know that there's like so much argument about
mhm,
and debate over when it was. But it's like
mhm,
1920s, 1920s, and so you know like there was a lot of debate about when it actually started, when it actually
mhm.
ended.
Yep.
Did it you know end with the Great Depression, or was it a little bit
Mhm,
later in the early 30s? And so that's another
mhm.
reason why I'm like kind of going through all of it before I fix my
Yeah.
date. I'm thinking mid 1920s is when I want to make it, but I just
Yeah.
want to get a feel for
That's
like, when certain establishments were open and when
mhm.
certain people were no. That's another thing. Like as I was writing the earlier chapters of it, um, is like okay, I wanted to mention one person or another, and the period, the year that I had originally selected. That you know they hadn't become big yet. That
Mhm.
jazz
Mhm.
artists or whatever. So just things like that that you need to know. Because if not,
That's
one thing I know about readers, they are going to tell you about yourself.
no, that's what an author's note is for, though. In the author's note, you can say, I know that so and so wasn't famous until later on, but it had to work in this story, you know, and any that's I do that all the time.
Interesting.
Just
That's interesting.
and and I will say too, my grandparents met at Macy's in New York City and in I think in the I think in the 20s. And my they used to go up to Harlem to go see Lena Horne perform, as far as I recall. Now, of course, they're not here anymore, and so I can't ask them. But they did used to go see a lot of music and do all that stuff. So that I'm just so excited. That's so cool. But
It
yeah, so
is
like,
fascinating learning all these things.
hmm
And the other thing is lately I've been talking to a lot of people who are writing um historical fiction where they're taking
hmm
like a real character and creating
hmm
historical fiction based around that character. So I'm like
yeah,
now I really want to incorporate people into the story that
yeah,
were real
yeah,
characters. And so that's fascinating
yeah.
for me. So um
That sounds great. I can't wait to read it.
thank
So
you. And
yep,
Veronica says, Yay, Reese, historical
yep.
romance. Yes, yes, that's what we want. And she also says, Good evening,
Oh,
as
hi.
does Jennifer. So thank
Oh,
y'all so
nice.
much for joining us. So let me go back here. Okay, there you go. So I like that you are, you know, for you, you're going more with the feeling and what they knew and stuff
Hmm
instead of trying to be super detailed. The like
Yeah.
what was the flooring or furniture or
Mm.
the name of the hat they were wearing or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. I like that approach to it. So now let's get into some of your stories. So you have some of the
Okay.
best series names, like Hazards of
hmm
Dukes and
Yep.
School for Scoundrels. So tell
Yep.
me about those two series in particular, Hazards of Dukes and A School for Scoundrels. Give us a
So,
brief view of both.
so Hazards of Dukes. My husband actually thought of that name because I was like Dukes of Hazard, and Scott was like, no, no, you can't have that because that's not you're gonna have. And I'm like, how about Hazards? And oh, okay. And I sure. I started that series with a kind of I guess what you call a MacGuffin, where I had a duke who was a duke, thought he was a duke. Papers got unearthed, and all of a sudden he's not a duke anymore. And the ripple effect of that affected the three heroes in the book. So it was just kind of like oh, here, let's upend everything in the world and see what would happen if someone that was completely accustomed to privilege had to finally figure out how to make it on his own. And he
Mhm.
was, you know, I think it's been so long since I even read those. I always forget. But they go into the kitchen to try to do something, and of course, he has no idea how to light a fire. Like he can't do a friggin' thing. because his entire life he's had servants. So it was fun humbling him that way. And then I did have someone in the final book who ended up being the Duke, who had never expected to be, and suddenly had to learn how to deal with all of that, and had to be, Mr. Aristocrat guy when he really didn't want to at all. For the School for Scoundrels, I got tired of writing Dukes, oddly enough. And so I came up with the idea of 5 orphans who had been raised together in an orphanage, but a nice one. There's no, because I don't write trauma stuff very well, because I hate putting my characters through pain. And they formed a really close bond. They each got adopted out to various families, and so they're in different circumstances. And in the first book, but they're still very tight. And when I was actually brainstorming it on Twitter, someone said they should have a book club, and so they have a book club. And as I was writing it, I realized they only read women authors, and which I've never come out and say, but it's obvious if you read the books. That's actually some research that I've done a lot. I'll be sitting there going like 16th century authors, female authors. Okay, can I do that one? Okay. And what was available in translation, because did they read Italian? I don't know. They probably didn't, because they weren't classically educated, right? So anyway, so
and those are things you have to give consideration to, even in contemporary. You usually have to think about things like that, but it definitely makes a lot of sense for that.
Yeah. So the book that came out in January is the first book, and he's a barrister, so that's like a lawyer, and he meets a woman that he thinks is about to fling herself off a bridge, but really she just wanted to look at the stars a little closer. It was kind of
this is in the Hazards of Dukes.
Oh no, this is the School for Scoundrels.
That's what I thought.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
they all run together after a while. Yeah.
Okay. So this is Theo and Alexandra.
So Theo and Alexandra, actually, that's the next book. So that comes out in May. Okay. Theo and Alexandra meet because she's a widowed duchess, and she finally gets to take her widow's weeds off. You had to be in mourning for a very long time. Thanks, Queen Victoria. But she finally gets to, shred. The first scene is her shredding her black clothing. And she goes out to a pleasure garden where she has an anonymous tryst with a gentleman. And then it turns out that said gentleman is supposed to marry her daughter. So hijinks ensue.
Yeah.
So she's 40 and he's 28. So it's an older woman, younger man. It's a one night stand that turns into something more. It's complicated by the fact that he has a ton of money, and the aristocracy often was very poor. They were land rich and obviously title rich, but a lot of times there was a lot of dynastic kind of negotiations where you give us a ton of money, we'll let you marry into our family and achieve some sort of social rise in your social status. And so that's the bargain he had been about to make, but he was already having second thoughts about it. But then he went to this place and did things. And then he sees her again, and oh god, yeah. I swear, when I was writing it, I was like, what am I doing? It was like the hardest thing I've ever written, I think.
Really?
Because I couldn't figure, I didn't want to make it too easy for them, but I also didn't want there to be any kind of hurt feeling. So the daughter immediately meets him and is like, dude, I so don't want to marry you.
Yeah. I would think you have to do that.
which makes it better, right? And he's like, great, because meanwhile, I'd like your mom. And the Alexandra, the heroine, has been under gentlemen's thumbs her whole life, right? So she was raised by her parents and then sold off basically because she's beautiful. In my mind, she looks like Charlize Theron.
Okay.
That kind of statuesque blonde. Okay. Yeah. Stunning, intimidating, but that's not who she is inside. which I always like playing with, like, who people are inside versus what they look like. And so she's struggling a lot with possibly giving up her autonomy again, because she's just gotten it for the first time ever. And the society back then said that women were the property of their husbands, and anything she owned belonged to him, and he could treat her any way he wanted to. And which had to have chafed women back then, no matter what the societal norms were, and that it was accepted or anything like that. Like, I can just imagine it. Actually, when I think about it, it makes my chest hurt. Like,
Right.
it's like, you think of, like, oh my God. Yeah. And it's, so I do a lot with that. And I think I write a lot about power structure and power dynamics. And so that made that book interesting to me. But I also set myself a really hard situation, having the daughter have to marry the, so. Anyway, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we had some comments, and I posted some of them.
Oh yeah, I saw it. Thank you.
Said, I absolutely love historical fiction, and about the story. Wow, that sounds intriguing, and that I love this one. From historical fiction, we readers get a plethora of history lessons. That's always the fun part for me too. And Cheryl said she can't wait to see what I come up with.
Yes,
so we'll see. Yep. Thank you for your faith in me. And then Ola, who joined us, says hello as well. So one thing I wanted to ask you too. So for a person who's not familiar with you, what would you recommend somebody coming to you that they start with?
I'm trying to think, like, probably not Her Lessons in Persuasion, which is the first book in the School for Scoundrels. They're both virgins. It's not super steamy. It's very awkward. It's very much my trademark voice, but it's not quite as, like, mainstream. I would think one of the ones that I think is the funniest is, and got the best title, One-Eyed Dukes Are Wild. And it's got an actual literal one-eyed duke. And there's a actual basis in history for why he only has one eye, which I wrote about in the author's note. But it's a big secret. Like, he won't tell her how he lost his eye during the course of the book. I will tell you if you really want, and that's fine. But I just thought it was hilarious and had to include it.
I kind of want to have that secret when I read it. So I want you to tell me.
Well, so he's very awkward. If you think of the way that Matthew McFadden portrayed Darcy with that kind of social anxiety, he's that kind of person. And he has no depth perception because he only has one eye. Right. Everything. And she is chaotic and wild and exuberant. And she's like, come on, let's go. That's one of my favorite books of mine. And she's just always daring him to do stuff. And he's like, God damn it, I have to follow her so she doesn't get hurt. Which is,
I love that. I kind of love that kind of trope about, like, oh my God, I'm just trying, I gotta save this person from themselves.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they're like, I don't need saving.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Like, who asked you?
Exactly.
So that's one that would be good to start with, I think. Yeah.
I like it. Okay. So for a person who has not read historical, and I'm going to say this because the funny thing is, the book that made me want to go from being a reader, I've been a reader since I was very, very young, and reading since I was very, very young. And so I love stories and reading, but the book that made me want to become a storyteller was Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And it just took me through the gamut of emotions and stuff. And I wanted to be able to do that for other people. So, like, I want to be a writer and do this. Yet when, I, raised a family and was just really more reading for work and stuff like that. So when I got back to reading for pleasure again, I was reading contemporary, I was reading chick lit or whatever. So it took me a while to read my first historical novel. after reading that as I was young. So I didn't read historical for a while, and it did feel kind of inaccessible to me. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this to talk about this topic of, because for a lot of people, historical might seem inaccessible. It might seem like something that they'll have to do too much research for, and it won't just be a pleasurable thing. And for me, I'm going to talk later about the first book that I read, a historical, that really kind of turned that idea on its ear. So that's why I wanted to talk about 3 reasons why people should get into historical. So there you are.
All right.
So for a person who hasn't read historical, tell me 3 reasons you would recommend that they give it a try.
Well, one of the reasons is I love escaping to other worlds. Now, I read a fair amount of fantasy too, and historical romance is a fantasy. Like in my books, dukes have their teeth. They have 6-pack abs. They're unmarried, and they're not horrible people taking advantage of everybody around them. Right? It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that you are familiar with the world of. She said, dangling her participles, but so you have seen it, but it seems exotic, and it seems glittery and sparkling and fun, because like I said, it's a fantasy world where everybody wears great clothes and people behave in certain ways and things are expected, but there's not world building in the same way that like a fantasy is, that you have to accept the premises that the author has set up. Like these things are generally accepted in historical romance of what the world is like, unless you're writing alternative history, which I also love. But so that's one thing to do, to kind of escape into a different world that isn't too foreign. I'd also say that I think that a lot of historical authors now are doing what I alluded to before, and playing with a lot of power dynamics, so that when you get a duke, he is he's second only to the royal family. He's a CEO. He's your billionaire CEO of contemporary romance, right? He's got all the power. He's got all the money, usually, unless he doesn't and he needs to marry someone, whatever. But he's still super important. And then if you've got somebody here who is, because I write male, female, cis romance, I always do have a woman as the partner. She has so much less power. So how do you, and this is what I hope I do by the end of the book, is make them meet in terms of the power they share. And I feel like a lot of historical authors are playing a lot with that kind of power structure. I'd say Sarah MacLean does it a lot. I'm trying to think who else. I can't. Of course, brain is civvy right now, so I can't think. But I know Sarah does it a lot. And then, okay, for the third reason, I think I already said, but the clothing. Oh my God, I just love the clothing. I am a huge fan of fashion, and I also find it really fun to talk about, he's suddenly frustrated by her corset and yanks it off or whatever. It's just delightful. So, yeah. And I don't think it has to be inaccessible. If you pick authors that write, with modern sensibilities, people are just still people, even if they believe certain things about where the sun was in relation to the earth or other stuff like that. They still had to interact with each other and live their lives and hopefully fall in love.
Yeah. And one of the other things that that we've kind of alluded to before, that I love so much about historical, is just the different little things you learn, things you learn about what was happening in that time period, or the things that people had to do just in living their daily lives, or just things like that. I find all of that so fascinating. So that's one of the things that I just really enjoy about reading historical. there's always something that you learn in every single one.
Yep.
And some more than
Yep.
others. Like as we start to talk about some of the authors, some of them specifically definitely are really, really detailed and making sure they're hitting that history and they're teaching you lessons and stuff in addition to entertaining you. So
I'd say actually Beverly Jenkins is the
that's
best.
that's the name. They're right on the top of my head.
I mean, when I've read Ms. Bev's books, I always learn stuff that is fascinating to me that works within the story too. She's not just sticking it on
exactly.
like, a glob of gum or something, whatever.
Right.
It makes
there's
sense.
a point to it, right? And it's in the flow, and it's not like, I just threw this, because that's the thing, we were doing all this research as authors, but half of that stuff that you look up, you're not gonna have, you're just not gonna have room to fit in there. So
no,
and that's
because you're not writing a history book, you're writing
exactly.
a romance. So if you start putting too much in there because you fall in love with your research, you're not falling in love with your character. So you need to just it's good to have the basis of it, but it gets too boring. But Beverly Jenkins does it supremely well. I think.
So that is before I segue into the next question, let me go back and hit some of these comments.
Oh, cool.
We have a Facebook user that says good evening and we appreciate you, but we can't see your name and your profile unless you go to the bottom of the description there on Facebook and give StreamYard permission to see your name and your profile. Then we'll know who it is. Okay, so Cheryl asks, I noticed that One-Eyed Duke is part of a series. Should the reader start with book 1? Can they be read out of order?
So they can all, thank you for asking, Cheryl. I write standalone books, but Margaret, the heroine of One-Eyed Dukes, is the sister of the heroine in Put Up Your Duke. And I actually got people saying, oh my God, I need to read Margaret's story. And I don't get a lot of those letters, to be frank. I don't get a ton of people going, oh my God, I can't wait for so-and-so. Mostly because, it's just off the top of my head, but I needed to have someone exuberant and wild kind of to pit against the heroine of Put Up Your Duke. So I actually don't think it would matter. I think you meet her in Put Up Your Duke, but I don't think you need to have read that to get a feeling for who she is, because in Put Up Your Duke, she's very much like a younger kind of bratty sister. And by the time of One-Eyed Duke, she's come into her own more. She's doing what she wants to do. She's living her life. And you don't have to know her before. Yeah. But thank you for asking.
Excellent question. Yeah, so next one. The next comment. Hello to Jacqueline Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us, author. Jacqueline Thomas, who's doing a lot these days, right? Inspired suspense, love inspires suspense, and so much more. So Veronica says, I love Beverly Jenkins. Absolutely. Love her. Paula White says Beverly Jenkins writes amazing historical romance novels. Absolutely. Cheryl says, I love when the author includes the everyday trials, like women dealing with that time of the month, for instance. I'm always fascinated by just learning all those little things and like wow. Like you said, little history lessons without making us feel like we're in school taking notes on a history. It makes it fun and exciting. So I do love that. All right, so now we can segue into talking about our Rex. So we've already talked about Beverly Jenkins, so we already know that's that's our first.
Yes.
I'm surprised I put the book down because it was sitting up here. I had just read it. One of my absolute favorites is The Raven. To Catch a Raven, I think it's called. I love that book so much. Oh my God, I love that so much. I love the hero so much. But I'm gonna ask.
Is that the one that with the kind of shyster family?
Yes.
And she has to go steal the. Yes,
they're con people. Yes.
So good. She
It
was
was
like,
so good because I'm
yeah,
terrible
I'm
with
not
titles.
taking any nonsense from you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was really good.
That, oh my God. I love everything about the couple. I love everything about the
Mm-hmm.
hero, her voice, the
Mm-hmm.
things we learn
Yeah.
about Pinkerton
Yep.
stuff. Just fascinating. Just the
Yep.
whole thing. I love it. And yet it
Yep.
doesn't feel like a history lesson, it just feels fun. So
Mm-hmm.
who else would you recommend? Who are some of your go-to authors who write steamy, engaging historical fiction? So you can recommend
Uh,
an author or a series or a book that readers should add to their TBR list.
so I am biased, and I'll tell you why
Are
in a
we
minute.
all?
But I do, well, yeah, I do love Sarah MacLean's series, the Hell's Bells series, the one she's doing now. She's the third book coming out this summer. She says it's like the Lady Avengers. So they're like a team of women who go around and right wrongs.
I love it.
The last book that came out, the heroine's last name is Frampton, which is me. So she named it after me, and she didn't tell me either. She gave me the arc, and I'm reading, and and I'm like, oh my God. And I texted her like, what the, and I hit Twitter. I'm like, what did you do?
I
Her
love
books
it. I have it down there too.
her
I haven't
books
had
are
a chance to read
so
it, but I have it. I
wonderful.
have so many of her books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love it.
And I like too that when she started writing, her voice is very different from where it is now. So you can usually find something you will like. I've liked her since the first book I read of hers, long before I knew her. So anyway, so Sarah MacLean, I really like Cat Sebastian. She writes queer historical romance. She's got an amazing voice. Everything is really fun and sparkling, and I think she says this too, her heroes are always a bunch of dorks, and they're just kind of flailing around, not sure what they're doing. And I love KJ Charles, who also writes queer historical romance. And she writes in a variety of time periods. Let's see who else I like. And I wish I had my Kindle. Oh, Joanna Shoup too. Writes in
Got
the
her on my
Gilded Age.
list.
Yeah.
I've read several of the Uptown Girls. Love that
Yeah.
series.
Yeah. And again, her heroines are fierce. They take no crap from anybody. She writes very sexy books, but she also does a ton of research, and that like infuses her books with such a great grounding of knowledge. Like one of her books is about a woman who wants to trade on the stock exchange, and what would that look like back in the Gilded Age? Yeah. Oh, and Diana Quincy, I really like her too. She writes Arab English characters because she is Arab, and so she's got a map maker in, I think, the Marquess Makes His Move, and she's got a widow who also has a one night stand with some dude. And anyway, she's great. She's a really elegant writer. She writes you could see that she would write alongside people like Jane Austen. She's got that kind of voice, very stately, but also puts in history about what it would be like to be Arab in England in the Regency period. So, yeah. And I could go on, but I will stop because. Yeah.
But I love it. I love it. I love that you're giving us all of this. I was looking for a particular name of somebody particular that I wanted to recommend, whose name escapes me. I like the book. I can see the book and all that, but I can't think of it. But so you named Sarah MacLean, Cat Sebastian, Joanna Shoup, who's also on my list, KJ Charles.
Yep.
We both
Diana Quincy. Yeah.
And then we both talked about Miss Bev. And then the book that that actually got me reading historical, I can't remember. I think I won the book. I think how I first read this book is I won it in some sort of a contest or something. And it was Courtney Milan. It was one of her Turner Brothers books. And when I read the book, I was like, oh my God, I've been missing out on this whole world because at the time I was only reading like contemporary and stuff. And so I'm like, I've been missing out on everything. So that made me start, looking at some historical stuff. So love.
Oh, Courtney is a lovely author. My God.
Yeah.
She writes, her books are so great. Yeah.
Lots of, historical information that you learn as well during it.
Yep.
And it's really super sexy. And it's just, fierce heroines as well, who have agency and do what they, they do what they need to do. So I read some of her books and I really, really, really enjoyed all of them and enjoyed her voice in them. Vanessa Riley writes historical fiction as well.
And
she's an amazing author.
Yeah, she has a ton of history in there too. So you definitely can learn stuff reading Vanessa's books. I'd say also she hasn't written anything in that genre for a while, but Alyssa Cole, same thing, where the history is so predominant and you really, really learn a lot through reading the books, but you're not bored by the history. It's part of the structure of the story.
Yeah, for sure. Erica Ridley, I was just thinking about too.
Oh yeah.
Who writes historical and some amazing historicals. But just so many other authors. Kiana Alexander also has written several historical novels that were really good. Sadiqa Johnson also writes a lot. I'm reading right now The Davenports, which is by Crystal Marquise.
I don't know either of those two. The Sadiqa,
and then she writes historical. As a matter of fact, her current one that's out that was on the House of Eve is the one I think is on was in the Reese recommended by Reese Witherspoon. It's been on the New York Times list for a while. And then the Crystal, I don't have the book with me. It's downstairs because I'm reading it right now. But it's called The Davenports. The book is yellow and
I've seen that book. Yes.
And that's actually a YA. It's actually a YA.
It looks excellent.
So good. I'm just I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 chapters into it or whatever, but it's just really, really, really good. So I am loving that. And so 2 questions. Let me go back to right quick. First, or the comment, Ola says To Catch a Raven was so good. Yes, it was. I cannot recommend that book highly enough. I'm a person who honestly does not usually reread things. That's a book I know I'm going to reread. It was just absolutely so good. And Darnell says, Courtney, who I missed the last name, is Milan, Milan. And the Turner Brothers series is the one that I started with. So that, Sarah McLean, Joanna Shoup, Miss Bev, Vanessa Riley. Like I said, that Davenport, the Davenports one again is another one. I feel like it's, even though it's a historical, it feels super accessible. It doesn't feel like it feels like a very easy read, because I feel like the thing a lot of people might feel about historicals is that it feels like it's too much work.
I get that.
It's a really easy read and it's just really enjoyable and it's fun and it's super interesting. And it's about this. That one's about a wealthy Black family, and I think the family they make these carriages that everybody uses, and that's where their wealth comes from at the time. So they're their carriages that they make are like top of the line. Everybody wants these, and so it's like about the daughters and them needing or wanting to get married or whatever, and the one doesn't want to get married. She wants to be a mechanic, and their family doesn't want to, just all. So it's just very different. It's about like 4 very, very different women. That's another thing. It's like an ensemble. So it's about not just one couple, but it's about these several different women in this time period and what they're going through. So it's just a really, really great read that I would highly recommend. And Ola says, I just bought the Davenports. Yeah, I love to know what you
cool.
Reading it, what you think of it, because like I said, I am reading it now and I absolutely love it. So, and then Cheryl has some recommendations, some of my favorites. that you should both try is Brenda Joyce, the Bragg Saga series, the Outlander series, the Black series by Joan Foster, and Kindred by Octavia Butler. I have Kindred, and it's been on my list forever to read, so that's something that I need to definitely.
I think everybody should read Kindred. I read Kindred. Yeah, it's her writing is. I mean, she's God. Talk about historical author. Like, I mean, in history herself, she's amazing. Just what she did back then and everything. But yeah, her books are great. I like the Parable of the Sower. I think the one I read of hers that I liked more than Kindred, but all those books, those series.
Yeah. I have so many of her books that I like are on my list to read. So
yep. So there's not enough time. We have to write books too.
Yeah, yeah, but hopefully things are slowing down a bit. I could actually have some time to do some more reading. I mean, even when I'm super busy, I'm still at this point I still sneak in reading because I just feel like I have to do that. So I make the time to do it, even if I don't really have the time. But
yeah,
I'd like to do a lot more reading. That would be nice.
Yeah.
So tell us his study in Scandal comes out on May 23rd. And what can you told us a little bit about that story? That's the one, and for that's the one you were talking about with the where she has this tryst with the guy, and it turns out to be the guy her daughter is supposed to marry. So if y'all are wondering the name of that one, that's what that is. That's His Study in Scandal by Megan Frampton, and it comes out May 23rd. So definitely there's you in the link in the description to the show, you'll see the link to Megan's website as well as her Amazon page so that you can check that out. So, all right. And so what can we expect next from you? You know, that's coming out May 23rd. What can we expect after that?
Yep. So the book after that is called Her Adventures in Temptation. And it is another one of these orphan dudes. This one is an artist, and he's not rich. And he discovers he has a half sister. That's not really important in the story. Why did I bring that up? Anyway, the heroine is being pressured by her brother to get married. She comes from a, well-to-do aristocratic family. So instead of doing that, she decides to take off in the middle of the night because he has run into some scandal trouble that starts at the beginning of the book. And she goes, "Take me to London." And so he does. And then again, things happen, and she's completely awkward. She is like me times 10 in a party. She's the one she's standing in the corner with her face pressed against the wall. So he's very charming, and he makes it so she's brilliant. So she can communicate to like regular people, because otherwise she just says these things and everybody else around them is like looking at her like, so that was a fun book to write because I really was channeling my social anxiety. And then after that, I'm not sure, because that was the last book on my contract, and we're working out details for the next. And I'm not quite sure what's going to be after that. But that book comes out January 2024, and it's already done and through copy edits and all that. So I don't have to think about it anymore. And her name is Myrtle.
That's a good point to get there, right? Until it's promo time. Until it's promo time, right?
Yeah. And I had so much fun writing a heroine named Myrtle. I don't know. I like picking really doofy names for my characters. I had one named Archibald.
A lot in a romance novel, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, usually they're like, what are they called? Like Hawk or Devil or something. No, mine are like Bob. I don't know. They're just dumb names. So
they're average every day. Got people names, right? So I like it.
Yeah.
So 2 things. Loretta says Octavia E. Butler's writing is timeless.
Yes, I agree.
And then Cheryl says Megan to reading your work. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm excited to read that story. Like, I love your voice anyway, but I'm so excited to read that story. His Study in Scandal, and that's coming out May 20th. So again, it's available for pre-order.
Yep.
And the links are in the description. Yep. So tell Megan, thanks again for joining us. Tell people how they can connect.
Oh, thank you so much. So I am, let's see, I have a Substack newsletter that goes out once a month. I think it's meganframpton.substack.com. I'm also on Twitter, although I'm currently locked out of my account, which started yesterday with some shenanigans, but usually I'm on Twitter. But I talk about a lot of K-pop because that's really what I'm into these days. So really not going to find a lot of writing stuff. And I'm on Instagram as Megan Frampton Books. And I think I'm on Facebook also as Megan Frampton Books. So I'm kind of all over the place. But the newsletter is a place where I just once a month talk about whatever's in my brain. But also we'll always have links and stuff like that. Oh, thank you, Loretta. Loretta says I will pre-order. Thank you. Yeah, so that's where to find me.
Very nice. And again, her links to her website and Amazon page are in the description below. So definitely make sure to follow her. Thank you again for joining us, Megan. We can't wait to read your books.
Thank you. This was just delightful. I love talking about books with people that love reading books as much as I do. So
okay, then you definitely came to the right place, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. So thank you all for joining me and Megan Frampton. If she was new to you, I'm excited to you have got a chance to meet her tonight, and definitely you want to read her books. Again, it is His Study in Scandal that comes out May 23rd. That's currently up for pre-order, but she has lots of books, period. But the two series that we talked about were The Hazards of Dukes. Nice play on Dukes Hazards. The Hazards of Dukes, and the other one was The School for Scoundrels. So those are the two series that we talked about. So if you want to check out any of those, so please do. And if you enjoyed the show today, by all means, please hit the like button and share the show so that other readers will find it as well. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Again, if you want to learn more about Megan, be sure to follow her on social media, go to her website, follow her on her Amazon page. If you might not know that as a reader, that you can follow authors not only on like what we only think of following in terms of social media, right? But you can follow their Amazon page. You can also follow them on BookBub. And when you do that, it also keeps you up to date on like new releases as well as like pre-orders and things like that. So that's always good to know. And then again, don't forget to join me in 2 weeks, which is when my next show is, because I do a show on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. So my next show is on the 16th, and I'm going to be doing a panel discussion on the importance of body diversity and body positivity in romance. And the three authors that are going to join me are going to be Lee Caron and Kayla Gross and Taj McCoy, who all have written stories with plus size heroines or that celebrate body diversity and body positivity in some way. So we're going to be talking about why they believe those elements are important in fiction and why they personally have chosen to champion full-figured characters in their stories. And so we're going to have a list in that show as well of recs for you if you're looking for that kind of book that have this kind of body positivity and body diversity. So definitely join us for that. And if you like author chats, don't forget to check out my friend Shay Baby's Brown Book series, where she talks to authors on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. So thank you all again for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you all again for being so engaged and asking so many great questions, having so many great comments. Appreciate it. You make the show wonderful and fun for us as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you for the comments. Veronica, Paula, Loretta, Cheryl, thank you all so much for your wonderful, lovely comments. You made my night. Thank you. So y'all take care. Happy reading, everyone. See you next time.